Are you okay? And how would you know if you weren't okay? You might know something is off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. In this video, I'll share with you the mental health checklist that I use with my patients and explain how you can use it too. And also, I'll share some questions I've yet to even share with my patients, so stay tuned. Hi, and welcome back to my channel, where Psychobabble is unbabbled. I'm Lewis-Hazan, a licensed professional counselor, here to help you increase your knowledge and awareness of all things related to therapy and to help you live a life that is well, wise, and wonderful. Here in the United States, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but any time is the right time for you to check in with yourself about your mental health. This month, you may have seen a lot of news segments, media, and local events all about raising awareness and educating the public about mental illness. And this is a great effort to get people to start thinking about their mental health. Checking in with yourself or someone you care about can be done at any time and should be done on a regular basis. With my patients, at almost every session, I like to run through a list of questions to help them check in with themselves so they can reflect back on the week to see how they're doing. I develop my list of questions based on existing checklists and also things that I typically see in patients. The areas or domains are generally the following: emotions or moods, thoughts and perceptions, mental functioning, physical well-being, purpose, meaning, connection and people, and harm to self or others. Most of my questions are based on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being as low as you can go and 10 being high as the sky. And sometimes based on the question, the answer may change from good to bad, and I'll explain that in a minute. Some questions only require a brief answer. Based on the answers, it may indicate an area of concern that I will want to go over with my patients later in the session. And for you, if you do the checklist, it will indicate the same for you. I suggest you check in at least once a week and do it consistently over time. You will begin to see some patterns in your numbers and your responses. And based on that, you'll decide if you really think you need to talk to someone. So let's get into the checklist. And what I suggest is that you go get a piece of paper and pencil, and just as I'm asking the questions, you do the response. So if you want to try it, I'll give you a minute to grab a piece of paper and I'll be right here when you get back. Let's get into it. Typically, I like to start with emotions and mood. So ask yourself, how are you feeling? Or how have you been feeling in the past week? Again, 1 is low, 10 is high. Now, ask yourself, have you been feeling angry, irritable, or frustrated? And if so, what word would best describe your feeling now in this moment or for the week? Again, 1 is as low as you can go and 10 is high as the sky. Now let's move on to thoughts and perceptions. Our brains are always thinking, and we're always thinking a variety of thoughts that typically have to do with what we're experiencing right now, things we have to do, other people, or about ourselves. I'm a little bit more concerned with the thoughts that you have about yourself, and if you're engaging in any type of negative self-talk. So ask yourself, have I been engaging in negative self-talk? And if so, to what degree? For this one, 0 is none, 1 is low, and 10 is high. So let's move on to stress, which can be described in a number of ways. When I ask my patients about stress, I like to separate it out from anxiety, and we'll get to that in a minute. The way I define stress is any pressure, adversity, or challenges from people, places, and things outside of yourself that affect your mood and are difficult to cope with. Think people, places, and things stressing you out. So ask yourself, am I stressed out, or how stressed out have I been in the past week? Again, 0 is none, 1 is low, and 10 is high. Now let's think about anxiety or feeling anxious, and this is you stressing yourself out by dwelling and worrying and overthinking things. Now, some concern and contemplation is completely normal and fine. It's what I call productive anxiety. But when you spend too much time in your head thinking about the past or the future or things you can't control, you could have a problem on your hand. So you might want to ask yourself, How anxious have I felt? How much worrying or dwelling or overthinking have I done in the past week? Again, 0 is none, 1 is low, and 10 is high. So in line with this, I like to ask my patients if they've had any anxiety attacks or panic attacks. Now, anxiety attacks and panic attacks are not the same thing, even though they are often used interchangeably. It's important to note that neither a panic attack or an anxiety attack need to have a specific trigger. A panic attack is an official DSM-5 diagnosis with specific criteria, and what you're looking for is an abrupt surge of intense fear or intense discomfort that usually peaks within minutes, during which time 4 or more of the following symptoms need to occur for it to be a panic attack. You might feel heart palpitations, or your heart might accelerate. You might feel chest discomfort. You could feel shortness of breath or sweating or trembling. Some people have explained it as feeling like they're having a heart attack or a medical emergency where they want to go to the ER. Those that do go to the ER typically leave with no medical explanation for what happened. An anxiety attack is feeling so overwhelmed mentally and sometimes physically due to excessive anxiety. Sometimes you will engage in so much worrying and fear-based thinking that you really upset yourself. Now, an anxiety attack may also have physical symptoms associated with it, but it typically comes on from a buildup of anxious thoughts, and it may last for a longer duration of time. So when you're thinking about anxiety attacks or panic attacks, what is more important is the frequency, the duration, and intensity of the attack and the symptoms you're having. So ask yourself, did you have any attacks this week? How long did they last? If so, how long did they occur? And what was the intensity? And you can use the same scale, with 1 being low and 10 being high. The next area that I ask questions about is mental functioning. And I usually start with motivation and execution, which for me are 2 sides of the same coin. So let's talk about motivation. So the way I define motivation is real simple. It's the desire or will within somebody to want to do something. It's not the actual doing. I'll get to that in a minute. But it's having hopes and dreams and plans and actually wanting to get things done. Now keep in mind, you can be motivated in some areas of life, but not in others. Like you can be motivated at school, but not at home, or motivated at home and not at work. And that's perfectly fine. This question actually can be applied to various aspects of your life: home, school, work, personal goals, so forth and so on. So ask yourself, how motivated have you been this week? Unlike the other questions, a high number is good. So 0 is no motivation, 1 is low, and 10 is high. Now let's move on to execution, or getting things done. So here you just want to ask yourself, am I actually getting things done that I have to do and that I want to do? Again, a high number is good, so 0 is not getting anything done, 1 is low, and 10 is high. The next area I like to ask patients about is their ability to concentrate. We all can't concentrate sometimes or can't focus sometimes, and that's perfectly normal. But if you notice a pattern of forgetfulness, or you really can't focus for too long on things that you really want to do or need to do, it could be attributed to a lot of things. It could be fatigue, it could be feeling overwhelmed, it could be feeling depressed, or more seriously, it could be an attention deficit disorder. So ask yourself, can you focus, attend, or concentrate on things you want to, whether they be preferred activities or non-preferred activities? Again, a high number is good. So 0 is no ability to concentrate at all, 1 is low, and 10 is high. So the next areas are not assessed on a scale of 1 to 10. They only require a brief answer or response. So the first one I like to go into in this area is sleep. Because sleep is very important, I like to ask my patients in various ways about their sleep and their quality of sleep. By answering the following questions, you can actually do the same. So ask yourself, how would you describe your sleep in 1 or 2 words? It could be good, bad, horrible, fine, adequate, not enough, insufficient. Next question. In the past week, on average, how many hours of sleep did I get? The recommended goal is 7 to 8 hours. So the next question, on average, do I fall asleep in 30 minutes or less? This is referred to as sleep latency, and the goal is 30 minutes or less. Now, the last question I ask is, once you get to sleep, do you typically stay asleep through the night? Moving on, let's talk about energy. Simply ask yourself, how's your energy level? Is it low? Is it high? Or is it your normal? Next is appetite. So ask yourself, how's your appetite lately? Is it poor? Are you not eating enough? Is it really high or excessive? Are you eating too much? Or is it your normal or okay for you? Next up is exercise. The goal is 30 minutes 3 to 4 times a week. That is the recommended goal. And typically I would include this in the next question about self-care, but I really like to separate it out because I think it's really important. So again, ask yourself, did I get any exercise in this week? And if you didn't, you might want to plan or shoot for it next week. So what is self-care? The way I define self-care is establishing any positive habits or practices in order to take care of your mind, your body, and your spirit in an effort to manage and reduce stress. What I like to tell my patients too is that it does not have to cost you money. Of course, there are massages and manicures and pedicures and all of that, but really, self-care does not have to cost you any money. Generally, the areas to consider when thinking about self-care are guarding your thoughts, making or taking personal time for yourself, taking care of your health and body, connecting with supportive relationships, feeding your soul and spirit, developing your intellect, creating a calm environment, and managing your finances. For more detailed examples of ways you can incorporate self-care into your life, at the end of the video, please check out the show notes below. There you'll find a free PDF that I created with all kinds of examples of ways to incorporate self-care in your life in the areas and categories that I just mentioned earlier. So ask yourself, what did I do today or this week that constitutes self-care? And if your answer is nothing, you may want to think about adding in a weekly self-care practice. The next few areas are also not assessed on a scale and don't really require a brief answer, but they are things you might want to think about and jot down a few words about how you feel. So for instance, with work, you might want to ask yourself, how's work going? Or how's school going? So if you have personal goals, you might want to ask yourself, what did I do this week to work towards my personal goals? And if nothing, you may want to change that the next week. When it comes to relationships and connections, you might want to ask yourself, have I connected with friends and family lately? And specifically, friends and family that are loving and supportive and generally make you feel good when you're in their presence. Now, if you're in a relationship, married or otherwise, you might want to ask yourself, how's it going? And when I ask my patients this question, I like to ask them and not to focus on how they feel about the other person, but the union or the relationship as a whole. Is it functional? Is it positive? Is it working? So here I ask people, unlike any of the other questions, I ask people to give themselves a school grade, A, B, C, D, or F. And if you're in another part of the world, your school grades may be different, so just simply adjust them to what your standards are. So if I have patients on medication, I typically like to ask them, how's it going? How is the medication going? And you'd be surprised at how many people forget to take their medication and wonder why they're feeling off. And more so, what I like to ask my patients is not only if they're taking the medication, how's it going, but is it working as expected or the way it used to? Sometimes people build up a tolerance, and that's another reason why you may or may not be feeling your best, because the medication is no longer working. And if this is the case for you, I highly suggest that you talk to your therapist about it or your medical prescriber. So ask yourself, are you taking your meds? How do you feel on your meds? Are they working? And last but not least, I ask my patients generally at every session if they have any homicidal or suicidal thoughts. Now, if you have these types of thoughts, this is not a question you have to ask yourself. You would know. And if you're having these types of thoughts and you need to talk to someone, please reach out. Here in the United States, you can call 988, the National Suicide and Crisis Hotline. Also, if you're in the United States and you find yourself or a family member in a life-threatening situation, call 911 or go to the nearest emergency room. If you're outside the United States, in the show notes below, I've attached a free PDF you can download with the countries that currently provide international emergency and suicide prevention numbers. You may want to begin there, but please double check with your country's government to ensure that you have the most up-to-date information. Once you've confirmed your country's information, please keep the numbers handy or in a visible area, and also store the numbers on your phone. I hope you found these questions to be helpful. Checking in with yourself is a form of self-care. To get started, I highly suggest that you try this once a week for the next 4 weeks. Use the video as often as you want. Get a journal. Jot down your responses on a piece of paper and keep a track of them. When you do this consistently, again, you will see patterns with your numbers and your responses, and only you will know if you really need to sit down and talk to someone about this. And to make things easy for you, in the show notes below is a lot of good stuff in the show notes below. There is a free downloadable PDF of my mental health checklist. May is Mental Health Awareness Month here in the United States, so please use the checklist now or at any time you need to check them with yourself. And as always, if you found this content to be helpful, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the latest content. And if you think someone else would benefit from this content, please share it. And until next time, be well, wise, and wonderful.